Tell a little about that before we get started.
Oh wow, you guys went down the rabbit hole. So I was close with like the founding team, and I was like, wait, if these guys can do it, like I think I can do it too. And the next thing you know, we have like hundreds users, thousands users, and the platform just starts to grow and grow and grow.
Wow.
And
So you can have all the marketing in the world, you can have all the launches, but if the product ultimately doesn't work, people are gonna stop using it.
kind of had this realization: I can do anything that I want. I can work on anything, but it's really important.
I understand AI, and I definitely see that is the future. I understand that. But what I don't like is the people that use it just to fully substitute themselves.
I need this product to be in a place where I can use it on my show notes and I'm not having to do too much work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, throughout the episode, that has been the theme. So
I'm about to go take a nap then. Yeah. Just do it.
Do it.
just do the thing.
Just do it.
Hey man, like Alex says,
Don't think about it. Don't think about it. Just do it.
We've got some
Hey,
fresh new
I'm
young
Luis.
talent
And
doing some
I'm
things that I
Luis.
know you haven't
and you're
heard
listening to the
before.
Content is Profit podcast.
We got the sounds today.
We got the sounds today. More on that later, guys.
If you listen to the previous episode, you know what we're talking about.
I know. But anyways, Fonzie, what are we talking about today?
Guys, today we have an awesome guest, and we're going to be talking all about how he raised around $50 million and how he's building apps. And this one specifically, the one that he's building right now, is for the future of podcasting.
I know.
And trust me, you will want to
Yes.
listen to what he's building, because we've been using it for the last couple months, and it has been a game changer.
I know. This app single-handedly changed Fonzie's view on AI. Just gonna put that out there.
Not really, but I will say this. The founder and I, we share similar views on AI, which is pretty cool.
Awesome. All right, guys, if you're enjoying these episodes, obviously hit that bell button in whatever podcasting platform that you tune into, so that way you know when these episodes are dropping in your phone. And make sure to follow us on social media at BIZBROS.
That is Ryan, today's guest. Help you move one step closer towards your goal. Please don't forget to share this episode and leave a 5-star review.
Yeah, so we have a super interesting guy today that we met recently at an AppSumo event.
He's a total baller. He co-founded Seated, a restaurant reward network for which he has raised like $50 million.
Pocket
and
change.
now
Pocket
he's
change.
co-founded one of our new favorite AI apps, Cast Magic.
Not to mention that he is the host of the DTC Pod, which is now part of the Hotspot Podcast Network.
Let's go.
And a challenger for the title of the Coffee King.
That is right. I searched. I was creeping on social media. We'll see. Maybe I got it wrong. Who knows? But please welcome the one and only Blaine Ballers. What's up, Blaine?
What's up, guys? Thanks so much for having me.
Dude, I'm so pumped to have you here. We met a few maybe weeks ago. We connected. You gave me a little tour of the app. I needed a little bit more knowledge on what you were building, and immediately I was like, I need to have this guy on the podcast.
Yeah, no, guys, I'm really pumped to be here. I'm glad we got to catch up, and it seems like we've been podcasting, we've been working in similar fields. We're both in Florida, so I was really glad to connect with you guys. And when you're like, you got to come on the show, I couldn't wait.
That's awesome, dude. I did my homework a little bit in there, creeping around social media. I saw you had this somebody tweeted something about you having this sick coffee setup, and I saw the video and I was like, dude, I never seen ever espresso machine this cool. Tell a little about that before we get started.
Oh wow, you guys went down the rabbit hole. So yeah, so basically, my dad is Italian. He grew up and lived in Italy for the longest time, and in the 70s and 80s, he was coming back to the States, and one of the things that he brought with him was this espresso machine called a La Pavoni, which is this old school espresso machine. And I remember when I was a kid growing up in the 90s, I would see it, and he would never use it because it's such a pain in the ass to make espresso, right? And he's over it by this time, so he's just making his instant coffee or whatever. But I like coffee, and then I was looking at this thing, I was like, does that thing still work? And I got it fired up. I hooked it up, and it makes incredible espresso. So yeah, you guys got to check it out. It's called the La Pavoni.
It's crazy. I mean, just for the people that are, I'm going to try to clip that video and put it here. We make a clip out of this. But I was looking at Twitter, and is this golden thing with like different knobs. The water doesn't come out automatically. You pretty much gotta like pump it through.
Oh yeah.
You know, the grind beans is insane. I was like, this looks fun. This looks like a ritual. You know, you hear all these entrepreneurs having like their morning rituals and all that stuff. Is that part of your stuff? Like you wake up and you're like, I can't wait to spend, 2 hours setting up this machine.
So the funny thing is I actually, this is a recent thing. So I was like the biggest coffee nut in the world. And actually, a friend, he like came up with this coffee. It's called New Wave, and it's like this like flow state sort of coffee. He's also in Florida. He's up in Fort Lauderdale.
Nice.
And so, yeah, I'd been like drinking that for the longest time, and it was amazing. But then I started getting like, I think I was probably just drinking too much coffee, period. And I started getting like these like heart palpitations and stuff like that. So I've totally quit coffee for the last couple months or so. But yeah, when I do drink coffee, I for sure make it in either a Greca, like a mocha pot sort of situation, or the La Pavoni. So those are the ways to go.
Hey, well, if by the way, if you end up quitting caffeine and you want to get rid of La Pavoni,
send it over.
Yeah, dibs. I call dibs.
Yeah. It's funny, but like when I was 15, I ended up in Italy playing soccer for a year there, and the team put me in this little hotel, and it was like probably like a 2-star, on the side of this little 20,000 people town. And the first thing that the owner grabs me to, and I knew no Italian, no nothing. And I was supposed to help with them in the kitchen and like serving. They had like a little restaurant. And the first thing that they taught me to do was to run the espresso machine that they had there. And it was like this big thing, and you have to like hit the thing to get the coffee going and press it and stuff like that. And it was a very crazy experience. And I wasn't drinking coffee until now. I met, FONZI and started working on these projects that we don't sleep now, but, but yeah, man, I relate. I love it. It's a ritual for so many. And I think it's so important. So thanks for sharing, man.
I'm gonna put a hard pivot in here real quick. Dude, Blaine, I want to learn a little bit about your background. I'm curious because I saw on your description in Twitter that I think you went to Harvard, which I was like, dang, like this is pretty mind blowing, right? It's not easy to get into Harvard. And then you, I think, co-founded Seeded, and now you co-founded Cast Magic. Have you always been interested in the startup world? Have you in software as well? Like, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I did my undergrad at Harvard, and this was like, I actually was just up in Boston last weekend for my 10-year reunion.
Cool.
And the crazy part around that time, like Facebook had come out of Harvard, right? And that was a really big thing. I was like in one of these final clubs that, like if you ever saw that movie, The Social Network, like Eduardo, one of like the co-founders of Facebook, he was in there as well. So like growing up in Harvard, like entrepreneurship was like, it was starting to be cool, but at Harvard, everyone was still like super into like finance and consulting and like those sort of jobs. But like in my class, I was like, I think one of like 3 or 4 people at the time who were just like kind of knew right out of the gates that like startups were the way to go, and not like, I just didn't really have interest in going, into like big corporate America. But like some of the other ones that were really interesting that came out, one of my classmates was John Collison. He ended up starting Stripe. Another one was, Matt Paliga, he started Mark 43, and another one, Max Campion, who started Home Tap. So there was like a whole, like a smaller group of people but we were, at the time, we were like kind of the weirdos who were into entrepreneurship. But and actually the way I got into it, I was doing like an internship with a friend in Boston who was working on this startup at the time, and they were like in the payment space. Like, so think like Square for like local cafes and that sort of thing. And they ended up getting acquired by one of the payment systems. And those guys right now went on and founded this company, Kushki, which is like the Stripe for LATAM. And they're like unicorn as well. So like I'd been exposed to all this startup stuff really early on. And when I was working at that startup, Leaf, it was called, I was kind of like, I was close with like the founding team, and I was like, wait, if these guys can do it, like, I think I can do it too. So that's, immediately I came back and started like tinkering and working on all these different sort of ideas. And that was kind of how I got the startup bug.
Man, that's awesome.
So you said the weirdos, they were like, look at me now, you weird. No, I'm kidding. No, I love it, right? And we talked often on environment, right? Like where you involved with, like, obviously I went to North Florida University. That's where I played soccer. And I remember the environment that I most enjoyed in that university was the entrepreneurship minor, right? Like I was going for business management and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to like leave this class. But the second I stepped into those other classes, they were very hands-on. They were like projects that we really wanted to build. And it was with people around us that really wanted to be challenged and do amazing things. Right. And it was really good. And like, you know, your bug, mine was not as big as yours, but at the same time was like, it allowed me to make the first steps to then start building what we're building now. And I think that's super important. So was your decision to go to a place like Harvard, for example, like, was that your end goal? And then after you graduated, and obviously it's 10 years, how important has that environment been to you? Like, do you keep an eye on keeping that environment around you to make sure that you can continue and perform and build the things that you're building?
So I think like when I went to Harvard, I didn't really like, I knew it was like a really good college, but I wasn't thinking of it in terms of like, oh, here's what I'm going to major in, here's what I'm going to focus on, and here's what my career is going to be. It was just like, you're in high school, you get into Harvard and you go. I think my mom would have murdered me if I said, I'm not going. I think at the time I was in high school. I'm from Southern California originally. I wanted to go to USC, and she was like, no, like you're going to Harvard. I was like, I guess that makes sense. So ended up going there. And, you know, kind of like I was saying was when you're going through college, there's a lot of people who maybe don't know what it is that they like or what they gravitate to. And I think people in general are just so, you know, they do what other people do because like it's what everyone else is doing. And there was just something inside of me that just said like, I really don't like, I just can't get this like, you know, finance or consulting sort of thing. And like, that wasn't really my vibe. I was like always more into like the creative stuff. And like Harvard didn't really have a lot of resources for me at the time to like tap into that as like a major or a focus. But like I was doing stuff like, you know, I was like designing like art and like flyers and like I was making music and I was like doing all these sort of like creative pursuits. So I think, entrepreneurship was just like the next evolution of like people who are kind of like geared toward thinking like that. I'm just always tinkering and messing around and trying to like break and build things. So that's kind of how I ended up. And then I guess to your second question, it's like, what role does it play? Like, I wouldn't say that like right now, you know, I have a couple friends from school that I'm like still very close with, but like, it's not like my entire network is Harvard people by any means. I actually like to branch out a lot. I've made a ton of great friends just through things like Twitter or things like, you know, friend of a friend who's also working on something cool. Like I'm not someone who's like, you know, let me only hang out with Harvard people. And actually the businesses that I've built, like because all of them have been more on like the consumer sort of landscape. There's certain businesses that having like a really strong network like makes a really big difference for, but like when you're building consumer social, like it almost doesn't matter how good your network is. It's like, can you build a product that the world likes and the world needs? And so maybe had I like started and thought like let me put my network to work, I could have come up with something better than like a restaurant app. But yeah, that's
awesome.
That's very interesting, honestly, you know, and it gets me thinking, especially your last comment, you're like something better than a restaurant app. But, you know, for what I read, for what I saw, it kind of seems that it got traction, right? It got some sort of success. And I'm curious about that. Right? Before going there, though, you told me you live in Miami, and now Miami is the hub, right? Like everybody's moving either, I feel, Austin or Miami, right? Like especially tech companies. Was that you know, do you make that decision on purpose? Like, hey, I want to move there, connect top entrepreneurs. You have your podcast, and I think you do it live. You bring people, to your apartment, and you have them in there. For sure. Such a good networking tool. So yeah, was that on purpose?
So it wasn't like super on purpose. It was basically like, again, I've always been someone who kind of like, I can like kind of feel things out, and I like things. And if they make sense, like I'll do them. So, you know, I was living in LA at the time during the pandemic, and LA shut down super hard. And, you know, my girlfriend, she used to spend a bunch of time in Miami. So she was in New York at the time, and we started spending a little bit more time in Miami, and it was open. It was great. And actually funny, I was working on a previous company that ended up not working out great, but we were starting to like raise capital at that time. And I remember I'd be like on Zoom, and I'd be in Miami, and like people would be like, this is like the early part of the pandemic, and VCs would be like, dude, like what's that background? And I was like, I'm in Miami. And they'd be like, Miami, like, interesting. And this was like before like Keith and Founders Fund and all these other funds like started moving down. It was just really funny to see that like narrative start to switch. But for me, the reasoning was really simple. It was like, as soon as a couple of those dominoes started to fall, especially like Keith and Founders Fund, like once he like was like, I'm leaving California, I'm coming to Florida. Like that became like kind of a no-brainer. I'm like, everyone loves Miami. It's a great place. Like Florida is a great place to be. Absolutely. The only blocker was before it was just, when if you were working in tech or you were like, you would be looking for jobs in other markets, and Miami wasn't like, it was like there was a bunch of foreigners here, or you could come down to retire, or, you maybe you're working in a different sort of industry, but like for the type of work that I was doing, like I couldn't find talent here. I couldn't have a team here. So it didn't quite make sense. But as soon as those dominoes started to fall, I was like, okay, this is a no brainer. If like tech is moving in, like I'm more than happy to be here.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell me about that journey on Seated, right? The app that you built. You started building that while you were still in Harvard? Was that a project after? And then, you did raise a bunch of money for that. And I'm curious about it all, right? Like, how did you start contacting those VCs? How do you learn about going about doing that, right? Was it in your previous SaaS job that you had?
So here's the whole background and the whole story behind Seated. So basically, like I said, I was at that startup Leaf, saw kind of what it takes to like start building a startup in the local sort of space. They weren't serving restaurants. They were serving more like cafes, quick serve, that sort of thing. But I started to like learn about product, about CX, about like sales, about local sales, about markets, all this sort of stuff. So anyway, the next, at that time, finished up school, graduated, and it was time to get a job. And, I'd gotten a couple offers, but like nothing that I like really wanted to do. Right. And so I was like, you know what, like I've got this idea and this was the time there were a whole bunch of like consumer social apps popping up. So like this was, I think like Snapchat had been out for like a year or two, like GroupMe, like there were a couple like anonymous apps that had blown up, like Yik Yak and like a couple like that. So there are all these like consumer social apps popping up, and I was like, I want to build a consumer social app. So we started, with a younger classmate who was still in college at the time. We were like, hey, I think there's an opportunity here to build what at the time was going to be like a thread-based conversation, like mobile app, right? So think like email communication was happening at the time. Yeah. So almost think like a social Slack, right? Okay. That's a little bit more organized. And so we're building out, and this was like 10 years ago, specifically for group communication. And when you're in college and when you have like a whole bunch of friends, it's like hard to organize conversations. So we're like, let's build this amazing group communication platform. And through that, we thought there was an opportunity to link in group chat and group communication into the like real world, like offline experiences. So think like dining, think like working out with friends, like workout classes, and like think like live events, concerts, all that sort of stuff. So we started building the app, started getting traction. But then when it came to like raise funding, obviously we weren't doing rocket ship growth or anything like that. And it was kind of like, what the heck are you guys building? You've got like groups on there, you've got group chat, you've got you've got experiences, you've got dining, like what are you? And I mean, I still to this day I still think like if we had enough money and enough time and enough effort, especially at the time we were working on it, I think it definitely could have really become something. But like, we were first time entrepreneurs. We hadn't really raised capital, raised angel capital, like friends and family to get started. And, clearly the writing was on the wall. If we wanted to continue doing this, we needed to like simplify and start to like trim things down. So that ultimately became Seated. So we cut out group chat, we cut out, live events, we cut out working out, and what was left was restaurants, right? We saw that was our most used activity was the restaurants. Yeah. So we take a super hard pivot into the restaurant space. And then we're like, okay, we have all these people. How do we get them to go out? And we're like, there's all these existing reservation platforms, and we didn't think we could be competitive as a reservation platform. So we're like, oh, why don't we do something with rewards? And previously some of the fastest growing companies in the world were like Groupon and like Living Social, and there were all these deal sites. It was like a totally crap experience for both the user as well as the merchant. So we're like, we could do something. And we saw like things like Facebook, like running dynamic ads and all this sort of stuff. And like, oh, wow, what if we like you build a rewards network with restaurants and we're able to like drive traffic to restaurants using rewards and dynamic pricing and all this sort of stuff. So that was kind of the idea that we started to go after and started to get some traction. And then we started to get people going out and dining. And the next thing you know, we have like, hundreds users, thousands users, and the platform just starts to grow and grow and grow.
Wow.
And that was the story behind how Seeded became Seeded, but it took a long time for sure.
Yeah. And that's crazy. That's pretty cool.
I want to take a couple lessons from there, right? Because obviously in our world with people that are, trying to put their message out there and publish, and at the end of the day, what they're doing is, either selling a product or a service, right? Something that you guys did there was you gathered the feedback when you were trying to trim down. You guys put a hypothesis out there with a product, right? You guys saw what was happening, saw the feedback from external people and also from your team, right? And you're like, okay, what's the one thing that's working? Right. And then that's where you guys decided and trim down and continue to focus on that. And I think that's a super important thing. In our own story, we had something similar when we started the agency where we were offering like 7 different things, right? We were spread way too thin, no team members, right? And we were going insane. We were not sleeping. We didn't enjoy what we were doing. And it got to the point where we had to sit down. We're like, okay, we wrote all 7 things in a whiteboard and we're like, what is the one thing that people kept asking for? And for us, that was like content production, right? And that's what we decided to do and what triggered everything that has been happening in the last 3 years. So I think that's a massive lesson for a lot of people that are building things now. It's like, okay, how do you gather that feedback, whether that's for your product or even for the content that you're producing, right? Yeah. What is the thing that's working? Continue to double down on that thing and go on. So
yeah. And one of my favorite, just piggybacking off of that, one of my favorite like concepts that I've been thinking a lot about recently is just the idea of like doing things just for the sake of doing them. It's like a good muscle to build, because when you do things, you're creating opportunities and things for you to like see what's working, right? So like
absolutely.
You don't have to hit the nail on the head every single time. You just kind of have to like bring this energy to whatever you're doing, and things will start to like figure themselves out, and you end up only having time to focus on the things that are like working best. So I totally see what you guys are saying.
Okay, I'm going to thread a needle following that thought, because I 100% agree with that, right? And I had a conversation yesterday, right? And a lot of the conversations that we have with the people that may be interested in our service, in our fractional content teams, or even curious, right? Starting a podcast, they're like, what's my ROI, right? I'm like, well, first of all, I have no idea. Like, do you sell something? Like, what do you do? Like, and we go into that rabbit hole, right? But at the end of the day, it's like for us, like our own personal journey, I think we started our platform, our show that's now on the Hotspot network, and it's been able to help us grow really. And the opportunity that we kind of teased at the very beginning that we have to announce in just a little bit happened because this, and it's probably the biggest opportunity that has ever happened to us. But 3 years ago, when we met the person that made, that connection, we never thought that was the way. And it was like just a continuous conversations and the continued reiteration and 3 episodes every single week and putting the message out there. And for us is, on the content side, same thing with the agency, right? Like you're going to find those opportunities as we start happening. So I want to encourage every single person that's listening right now, whether you're building that product, you're doing the reps, right? You're publishing, you're putting your content out there every single day. Trust the process. Your opportunities are going to go. And if you put your relationships in the mix, like we've mentioned in the past, like collaboration through podcasting, right? I'm assuming that's probably one of the reasons you have a studio in your house, right? Things and opportunities and conversations are going to happen that are going to trigger your next steps. So have faith that's going to work. So Blaine, thank you so much for bringing that point on, because I think a lot of people need to hear that. It's like, okay, I'm putting in the reps. I might not see the clear picture, right? It might be like a little foggy, but as I move forward, that fog is going to move away and I'm going to see the opportunities.
Oh, 100%. And I think just to like piggyback off that, right? Like when I started DTC Pod, like our podcast, like I didn't have a clear, like, sure, it was like, okay, we're going to talk to e-commerce merchants and the company that I was working on at that time, that it would have been great for some of them to like sign on with us. But I was like, beyond that, I was like, I'm sure I'm going to build a bunch of relationships through it. Like, I don't know where this is going to go. And had I not started the podcast, I would have never had the problems that I was having to build Cast Magic. So it's like, you never know where things are going to go, and you just do things and then good things happen so long as you've got like the right attitude and you just keep pushing.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah. I got so many questions, man. Like this conversation can just go anywhere. It's a simple question. And this one is just because I'm super curious about it. Are you the technical founder or no?
No. So I'm not. I'm more of like on the CX go to market and product side, and then Justin is our CTO.
Nice. All right, cool. I was just curious about it. But now I'm, tell me a little bit about that transition. You started Seeded, right? You just shared the background, the story. I'm curious on that transition. Do you still own Seeded? Did you guys exited that?
So I exited, but I still have ownership.
Nice.
Just, basically when you're in a company, I was working on Seeded for about 4 or 5 years before we even raised a proper seed or an A, right? Like, wow. And it was hard. It was not easy. And like, you can go back and like Google and like Seeded will come up and it's like new startup in like 2019 or whenever they raised their first round. But like the reality is there's a lot of work that goes into it before you start reaching that inflection point. Right. And a lot of VCs, like they love the narrative, like, oh, this company's growing so fast and it's an overnight success. And like, they're kind of chasing that. And then entrepreneurs are like, crafting their story. And, so like, sure, the platform that we started, it wasn't Seeded, evolved into Seeded, but, that was a long process. And then by the time we started raising an A or a B, like I was kind of like, look, I've been here for a while. I'm fully vested. I know what, I know what this thing's all about. And like, again, I didn't get into restaurants because I loved restaurants or anything like that. I got into it because I had raised a bunch of friends and family's capital. And I was like, I'm not losing your money. And I'm going to like keep pivoting and keep making it and doing whatever we're going to do to make it work. So I was like, look, there's better operators out there to like scale this thing from like, 2,000 restaurants to 10,000 restaurants and like scale it to all these markets. Like, I was like, that's not me. And so it was really, and I think you see this a whole bunch of times with entrepreneurs. It's like, you can work on multiple things, right? Just because I started Seeded doesn't mean the only thing I can found or work on is a, restaurant rewards platform. Like there's many things that I could work on that are exciting. So that was kind of the logic. And, I saw some different opportunities that I wanted to work on. So that was kind of the step out where I was like, I want to start a new company.
Yeah, absolutely. So just going back to my brother, kind of like pickpocketing here, some of the lessons. I love what you mentioned about is not an overnight success, right? And it might look that way. Some media might portray it that way, right? Of course, it makes the VCs look like, oh yeah, we found this, this new gem up and coming. But what you said, right? You spent like 5 years hustling and grinding and trying to figure this thing out and building. And it's the same when you're trying to build a brand, right? When you're trying to create content. I mean, we've been doing Content is Profit now for almost 4 years. Almost 4 years. Right? We are 400 episodes. We do it 3 times a week. DTC pod, right? Like you've been doing it, I'm guessing for a few years. I think you have like over 200 episodes. And
we're like 280.
280, almost 300, awesome. Man. And for us, it was after a few years that the opportunity with like HubSpot came about. So again, it takes time. And to my brother's point that he was talking to somebody and they're like, all right, what is going to be my ROI? Especially I feel like in this game, it's like, hey, you need to be patient. Like you need to play the long game. And it's like that with any business. I do think there's some people that sure, like they're pretty smart, that they know how to jump on trends and leverage that pretty quickly, right? But those are not going to be sustainable businesses that are going to be around for a long time. They probably want to make a quick buck, right? Turn around that company and then go on and chase the next quick thing. But what you're building seems like you were in there for the long term, right? Like let me build something that can sustain time.
So one of my like recent revelations that I had, because I spent time building Seeded, right? Did that, spent time working on another company that was like we basically built like this e-commerce, like customer data platform to connect data across like Shopify and all the other plugins in the e-commerce ecosystem. Didn't end up working out. We ended up returning capital. And after that, I was like trying to figure out what to do. And I kind of had this realization that like, again, I can do anything that I want. I can work on anything, but it's really important that to me that I'm building with people that I like. So like teammates and people that I want to be around that like charge me up, and solving problems that are like interesting to me. So like solving problems that I'm interested in solving and working on those problems with people that I want to be working on them with. So once I kind of had that realization, it kind of like changed my expectations of like what I was looking for in terms of like happiness and success. And I like right now, my view about the world is like, it's pick the right puzzles to solve and pick the right people to solve the puzzles with. Like that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. If you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I'm 32.
32. Cool. We're like around the same
generation.
Yeah. I'm 30
generation.
and he's about to be 34. Damn.
Yeah,
bro.
damn, bro. Stop saying that. I know. You look at, obviously Miami, you probably don't have kids. I have 2 kids, so, I'll take that win on the group over here. No, I'm kidding. But I'm curious on, obviously, I think I want to transition to the thing that you're building, right? Where how we connected with you. I'm in love with Cast Magic, right? So I think the first time we saw it was on a Slack thread with the Hotspot network. Somebody shared the two, be like, hey guys, this might help. And I was like, clicked it, and I'm like research and development mode. I'm like testing, playing with the thing. And I'm like, in a part of the process that we execute with our team and with our clients, right? We have a section that's called Value Index, right? And we grab those ideas. And until now, we've been trying to like leverage AI and technology and see how we can do that to optimize with our team members. That started as a human process, right? Somebody going in and actually watching the content and labeling it and making sure that we can grab the clips that are relevant. And from that moment on, we're like, how can we make this more efficient, right? And leveraging technology to do that. And until it's probably like 2.5 years until we found your app, and your app has helped that massively. So we're going to leave all the links right below, and where people can check it out. And I immediately became in love with that part of the process. So we integrated it in a couple of aspects, right? So now the question to you is like, it seems like very niche of an app initially, right? And which is in a
probably learned the lesson.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. Which is amazing, right? So I'm curious, like, why you guys decided to go into that market, right? With long form and the product that you guys provide. And how was like that initial startup, first few months on developing this app, like from idea to, maybe the first side of the product?
I'm going to add to that. I would love to see a comparison, or to hear about a comparison between your first years with Seated and then the first couple, years with Cast Magic, to see kind of like that contrast.
Oh man. So much to say. So obviously excited, super excited that you guys like love and use the platform. Basically the way it started was I host a podcast, and similar to you guys, I have the same problem in terms of like taking, we have amazing guests, we have amazing conversations. There's so much content, but it's like when it came time to like publish and promote the show, it was like, oh my God, what do I even do now? Who do I find that even understands the context as well as I do?
Yeah.
So they can find the right clips, they can find the right way to write the social post. And then, we tried a couple agencies, we shipped it off to VAs. And then the awkward thing, it's like when you're doing podcasting, like you can't mess that shit up when it comes to content, because like you just had this guest on your show. And if you like misspell their name or like you do a bunch of stuff wrong, it's like, it's awkward, right? And you're like, oops.
Yep.
So I was going through that whole thing, and then the co-host of my podcast, Ramon, had a friend, Justin, who was like the head developer, head of platform at blockchain.com. He had recently sold his company Upside to a different company, and he'd recently gone through an acquisition. And he was like, yo, I'm going to be, with Justin over the holidays. Like I'm going to tell him about, our idea basically. And the reason I had this idea is because I saw, I'd always been playing around with AI with like, GPT-3 as it came out. And then I started adopting like, Jasper and Copy AI and some of those like initial like marketing tools that productized on top of it. And like, they weren't quite there, but like, I was like, wait a minute, maybe there's something we can do with podcasting here. Right. So, I thought it was like a cool idea, but I didn't think it was like a big idea. So so I was like, okay, Ramon, like, yeah, sure, talk to Justin. We'll see what he says, whatever. And then Ramon tells Justin, and Justin's like, oh, that's a good idea, I'll build it. And we were like, what? Like, what do you mean? So we got introduced to Justin. I think this was like, like December 31 was like our first call, right? Like last year, end of 2022. And we go through it, and Justin's like, yep, I get it. Makes sense. Like, here we go. So, and it just started as like a total side project, really. I was working on other things. He had his day job, and, weren't putting in a whole bunch of hours in the beginning, but like quickly got to an MVP where I could take my own podcast on my own content, put it in there. And then it was fun for me because I was like totally dog fooding my own product. I was just like, basically, I was like, no, we got to get it to here. I was like, I need this product to be in a place where I can use it on my show notes and I'm not having to do too much work. So I was like the guinea pig. And then, we ultimately got it there. And then fast forward only a couple of weeks, honestly. And we're talking to actually AppSumo. So AppSumo and like Nick, their head of marketing, were introduced to them by Diego, who basically does like the clipping for us and was like working with, them and like Sam Parr and a bunch of these other content creators. And we're talking to them and they were like interested in podcasting. And we didn't really know that if there was an angle between DTC Pod and AppSumo, but then we told him we're building this, Cast Magic. And he was like, oh, that's great. Why don't you like throw it on the store? Like, we'll do a launch with you. We'll launch with like Noah Kagan at South by Southwest. We'll put together a panel. We're like, dude, that's like in 3 weeks. And he's like, yeah, can you make it? And we're like, I guess so. So we'll have to, we'll see you there. So we just started, building. We're like, okay, here's our deadline to launch. And it was great. It was like mid-March. We launched on this panel, with Noah Kagan, Sam Parr, Justin Mares, and a couple other big content creators. And it like, since then, it's just been like blowing up. Like we got it out. It wasn't like a perfectly polished product, but like since then we've been able to like start putting the polish on, getting it to where we want it. And it's been blowing up since then.
So, dude, thank you for the full recap and props to you guys, right? Like starting with this as an idea, right side project, and then it's evolved to the thing. And I think something that I really want to highlight is like the product works, right? Like, because you could have all the marketing in the world, you can have all the launches, like the leverage with like the personalities and the push. But if the product ultimately doesn't work, people are going to stop using it. And that has been my experience with other platforms, right? In a sense. And we've tried a few of them, not specifically for the thing that yours does, but within the process, right? You have the creation process. Like, what do I actually say? Like, how do you collect that information? How do you actually create? What's the technology that we're using? Riverside, Zoom, whatever, right? How do we actually produce it? Like in our side, we have a physical team, right? That is a VA aspect of it. How do we actually distribute these things? In part of the distribution, what problems that you guys solve and the caption writing and the thing, that's a big pain point for a lot of people, right? They spend all this time producing, creating, and then when it comes to the distribution, the content doesn't go out because there's like these tasks that we have to do, right? And then that gets delegated to a VA that might not be the best on doing these things, right? And then it's connecting it to revenues, right? If we can shorten those gaps between these processes, right? Then we're going to be able to move faster, put more stuff out there, test more things, right? Kind of like what we talked, and gather that feedback to continue doing it. So for those that don't know what Cast Magic is basically this piece of software that you put in a piece of audio, right? You label your host, specifically on the podcast space in this sense. We've used it for another case studies, but it spits out this amazing information, like a full transcript, samples of scripts that you can do for reels, right? Timestamps, Q&As, questions and answers, like all these amazing gold, right? And I probably like describing probably 20% of it. So I would really want to encourage you to go in and try it out. But for me, the impression was it was effortless, right? It took just a few seconds and I got this back end products of ideas, bank of ideas, bank of questions, ready to actually do scripts, which by the way, we tried it right away and it was one of our top performer reels. And I was like, this is incredible. And the fact that it goes from the creation that I don't have to think about it, this is my thing. And then obviously if you are an expert and you know what you're talking about, then the transition to creation is very fast. This is amazing, man. It reduces our times of execution and thinking about what we're going to actually do. And then on the final product is we're leveraging it with the people that we help and with our own podcast. So that was the thing that I'm going to take away, right? The product works and you guys continue to gather feedback. You guys continue to talk to the community. And I think there's some lessons in there for a lot of people that are building stuff.
Yeah. I want to highlight too something interesting, and I asked this specifically about the contrast between started seated and starting this one, right? Like this one seems that is moving faster, right? And I think is in part because it took long on the previous venture, right? Like you guys took your years learning this one instead of saying, oh, let's create independently of whatever content you feed it is going to create all these other things. You're like, nah, we're going to do something for a podcast. So you decided to niche down pretty fast, right? Obviously it was one of the problems. You're solving a problem for yourself, which I think is great. And the fact also that you said, I am a user. On the previous one, you were like, I don't really care about restaurants, right? But now you're like, I do care about my podcast, and I do care about, putting a quality product after the podcast is out to promote it, etc. So you're a consumer too, right? So I think without the previous experiences, I don't think you guys would have gone as fast with this product at all, because you're definitely implementing some of those lessons immediately. And also the fact that you are a user of your own products. And I'm looking at your page right here, right? I love the headline: podcast show notes and content in a click. Upload your MP3, download all your post-production content. Like, simple, to the point. And I'm looking at the website. I'm curious, like, who wrote that page? That's pretty good.
That was me.
That was you, dude. That's pretty good.
But yeah, I think to your point, like, again, everything that you learn and do in life, like, it builds and builds and builds on top of it. So when it came to like launching Cast Magic, like, I know how to build a website in Webflow. I know how to write like copy. I know how to like do all this. So like, I spun up our website in like a weekend, so it's like, but again, if I had not done that, and if I had not learned that, and like failed through a bunch of different startups doing that sort of stuff, like, it would have taken me way longer, and I would have gotten way more things wrong. So I think that's where knowledge starts to like compound on top of itself.
Yeah.
It gets really exciting.
100%.
Like, for any entrepreneur, really.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite like quotes is actually from Tom Bilyeu, and I see here that Impact Theory uses Cast Magic, and I'm curious to see how you guys got in there, whether that was them finding you or you guys reaching out. But one of my favorite phrases is, he says, "I prefer to move 100 miles an hour in the wrong direction than standing still." And it's just that, because moving at the wrong direction, at least you're taking in lessons, right? You're learning. Not doing anything, you're not going to learn ever. And then you 100%. Are able to course correct, right? Like, how are you going to know if you're not moving, right? Like, how are you going to know you're not even going anywhere, right? You need to be going somewhere at least to course correct, and then make the right decisions. So
100%. Yeah. And I think that is like, and I think we've been talking about it a bunch in the show, but it's like, just do something and you're going to learn something. You can do something, and you may not think it's going to help you out in the future. You could have all these different failed ventures, but like, you're going to learn a skill. You're going to like, something's going to click, and then you're going to have a lesson that next time you're at bat, you're going to be able to apply it, and you're going to know. Right.
Yep.
So
100%. That's awesome, man. We're getting close here to the end, and I still have so many questions. And now that we're gonna bring you for sure for a second interview. But tell us a little bit about what's next, right, for Cast Magic for you. Do you have any other projects too that you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, I always have a bunch of different projects, but for now, Cast Magic is in the driver's seat. So basically, a couple other things that I think are like really cool about what we've been able to build, and like the learnings building Cast Magic. Number one is that, again, when we started, like you guys have said, it's a super like very specific niche, but I always believe in like talking to customers, and like, I believe like having the best in-class CX is like the way to build products, the way to build businesses. Like, that's the way. And so one thing that I pride myself on a bunch is like, I will literally talk to everyone. If you go to the website, like, we're doing like 100,000 site visits a month. And like, if you book the demo on the website, like, you talk to me, right? Like, if you chat through the app, there's like a chat widget there, like, you talk to me. So like, I'm like literally on the front lines of the product as much as I can be. And a lot of people might say like, oh, I don't know if that's necessarily the best use of your time or whatever. But like, for me, the way I come up with product direction, strategy, like team, is just being as close to our customers as humanly possible.
100%.
So for me, that's like the unfair advantage where people are like, oh, that's not scalable. Why the hell are you doing that? Like, I love that. And I think it's like the best use of my time, because I'm able to like kind of be everywhere, have like a real pulse on the customer, the market, what people want. So I'm not over here and just like building a product for myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then one of the coolest lessons for Cast Magic and kind of where we're headed is, we built it for podcasters, but like, in very simple terms, all we're doing is we're taking content, like audio content, long form audio or YouTube, whatever you want, you bring it in, and we're taking that and we're turning it into purpose-built content assets that are like already ready to go out of the box. Right. Yeah. And the reason that was a problem before, and the reason AI is such a big unlock, is like, before we could do an interview, right? and we could have some software that's going to transcribe it for us. But if we wanted to now create a blog post, okay, I'm going to have to like go read the transcript, make a blog post. Now I want to go write an email, a thank you email to my guest for coming on the show. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go back to the transcript, find some things that we talked about, some talking points, write an email. Okay. Now I want to write a tweet thread. Okay. Got to go back to the transcript, figure everything out, and now create a new purpose-built asset. So every single asset that you were making, sure, there's like overlap between them, but it takes a whole bunch of work. So that's why we were like, wait a minute, what we can productize is this way of turning long form audio content into ready to post evergreen content assets like instantly. And that's what was kind of the big unlock. The next big thing that we got really excited about is when we're talking to users and seeing how the usage was going. All of a sudden, we started seeing people who were using this that weren't just podcasters. And I was like, why the hell is like this like course creator using Cast Magic? Like, why the hell is this church using Cast Magic? Right? Like, it didn't really make sense. Or like, I had people who were like literally putting voice notes into Cast Magic and just like, they're like, Blaine, oh my God, I just rambled into my voice note app for like 5 minutes, put it in Cast Magic and got the craziest stuff out. And I'm like, dude, those are like podcast content assets. They're like, in this episode, we talked about this. So as we started to like see what was going on, we're like, holy shit, actually, there's a way bigger opportunity here than we actually even thought to begin with.
Yeah.
And now where I see kind of Cast Magic going is like, what we're really building out is like, it's almost like the Notion for voice, right? Mm-hmm. Where you've got content assets. Just because you guys are content creators, that doesn't mean you guys don't take Zoom calls. That doesn't mean you guys can't record voice notes. That doesn't mean that you can't, make YouTube videos. So you've got content coming from all these different places. And what we want to be is the layer to basically pull all that like multimedia content in, have it organized, have it like productized into whatever use case you want, and be able to workshop and, deploy wherever you need that content to go.
So good.
It's pretty amazing what you build. And, to your first point that you say you like to be there with the customers. I remember I booked a call through the site. And when I talked to you, I was like, hey, dude, I just saw you on the AppSumo event. I was like, aren't you the founder? And you're like, yeah. And I was like, I totally thought it was going to be like a sales guy jumping on the call, right? And I was pretty impressed that it was you taking the call. And it was awesome. I got to know you, got to invite you to the podcast, got to learn way more about Cast Magic and what you guys are building, which was amazing. And I think it builds rapport with your customers. It's appreciated, right? So to your point, if somebody that is listening to this is building whatever it is, an agency, right, a direct to consumer or a B2B service, make sure you are in the front lines talking to your customer, because they're the ones that are going to tell you what is that they need. And even sometimes they tell you how they want it to be solved. They're just waiting for you to build that.
Yeah. Ben, before we head out, I really want to share like a little bit of the case study on how we're using it, right? I think like more tangible for people that might be listening to this, right? Might help on like why I was so excited, right? So we part of our message is always like trying to find the least friction way to actually produce the content, right? When we first tried to launch a show, we had Brews and Bros, and it was like a 1 hour setup. We really, we're figuring out the day off, like what we wanted to talk about. It was debriefing marketing. It made no sense, right? And we did 5 episodes and that's it. And then a year later, that's when we're able to launch Content is Profit, because we really lean on the live aspect to it. We're like, we're going to be curiosity based. We enjoy this, right? We like it. We don't, making a script might not be the best use of our time because like we just don't like it. And then obviously that process has evolved, right? But a lot of people have a lot of friction when starting to do it. Fonzie loves to write. I hate to write, right? So he enjoys doing a long form blog post. Perfect. That's not for me. So like for me, for example, personally, what I like to do is having these conversations, feed these audio into Cast Magic, right? And then Cast Magic is going to give me obviously the transcript that helps for, SEO on the website. Then it gives us different descriptions for the podcast, right? It gives us the email that we can send to the guests. It gives me a real script that I can put on a different app or read it from it on my phone. And then that's an organic reel that we can publish right off the bat, right? So we're always looking for this way to be present online as multiple times as possible, right? So we can actually gather that feedback. And this, like the time that then it took me, because I measured it, it was about 3 to 4 hours from the podcast episode to trying to create these assets. Now is reduced to like 10 to 15 minutes and then creation time, which is like very, very quickly.
I want to ask something here real quick. At the beginning of the episode, you were saying that Blaine here is the one that, changed my view in the AI world, right? And I remember talking to you about this. I was like, look, like, I love your product. And the reason being is because I'm not like, I understand AI and I definitely see that is the future. I understand that. But what I don't like is the people that use it just to fully substitute themselves by AI. Like they totally leave the creative process. They throw it out the window and they're like, let me just copy and paste whatever it gave me. And I'm going to put it out there. And now people are starting to catch up, right? Like literally this morning, I saw a Facebook post by a really good friend, big entrepreneur that I respect. And he's like, some of you are using a lot of ChatGPT and it tells in your post, right? Like you just literally copy and pasting. Yeah. But what I told you that I loved about Cast Magic is that first, it does a really good job. I don't know what you guys did in there, but it does a really good job at identifying good quality key ideas, which other AIs I've struggled. I'm like, this is not like, I know it for a fact. And I look at it and I'm like, this is very random, right? I know it just picked up something random from the conversation. You guys do a great job at that. And then second, what I like is you got it gives you the output is quality, right? Like the writing in it is quality, but it's a great starting point. For example, for somebody like me that enjoys writing and, you know, I'm reading these things. I was like, okay, let me now put it in my voice. Let me add to it. Is a great starting point, right? So that's where I'm going with it. My point still remains the same. I'm not a big fan of the people that just copy and paste it and that's it. And it's like, let me just publish it. I'm like, add more of your spice to it, you know? Yeah. And but at the end of the day, it does save you a lot of time.
Yeah. Again, Ben, thank you and your team for putting this together. Again, thank you for coming to the show. As we're wrapping up, obviously, you know, we have a couple of questions to wrap up. This might be like very fast questions, but you know, it's like, obviously an action point as an entrepreneur, right? Like if they're building something, what is something that they can do today to move the needle forward?
I think kind of what I would say is just what we had talked about before, like literally do anything. Even if you don't think it's productive, just do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, throughout the episode, that has been the theme. So
I'm about to go take a nap then. Yeah. Just do it.
Do it.
Just do the thing.
Just do it.
Hey man, like Alex says,
don't think about it. Don't think about it. Just do it.
Nap or workout, right? But one is only going to get you buffed. That's
the hormozy thing.
That's the hormozy thing. But, and then where will you be if you never publish, right? You have a very successful podcast. You know, you've been out there. What happened if you never put your voice out there?
What do you mean? Like what if I hadn't created a podcast, you mean?
Or if you've never published, if you've never put your message out there, where would you think you would be at the moment?
Yeah, I think like having a podcast and publishing, it opens up so many opportunities that you don't know are going to be opportunities. Like had I not started a podcast, I wouldn't be, you know, having my own podcast. I wouldn't have a problem to solve. I wouldn't have had all the connections that I have. I wouldn't have launched Cast Magic. I wouldn't have even have met you guys, right? So it's just like there's all these events that like happen in life just by taking action and by like publishing. So absolutely, just go for it.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add, Blaine, as we wrap up?
No, that's it. I think the things that we're really excited about in Cast Magic is like, as we diversify like our product offering, is like we are productizing for all sorts of people. So even if you aren't a podcaster per se, like you can use it. We're building the presets. We've already introduced customization. So anyone can take any sort of like audio, conversational, like voice memo, monologue, dialogue, whatever it is, put it in there and like use AI to like get the exact content assets that they need out. So that's the only thing that I wanted to throw in is just like, we got really excited about that and about how this isn't just something for podcasters. Sure, we can use it and we can solve our own use case so we never have to worry about it again. But we're really excited to start opening up the product aperture to really solve any sort of creative.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome.
I see it a lot in like executive assistants, in meetings, in things, in pitches, different things that you can grab feedback from and have those assets and continue to build on different things like that.
Yeah, you just mentioned before we started here that you guys were doing that with the customization, and I think it's huge, right? Because depending on whatever you're producing, the output might look a little bit different. So the fact that you now have pretty much the power to, customize all that depending on your own needs is going to be huge. It's going to be a huge time saver.
Sweet.
Yeah. And I mean, like even for you guys and your show or anyone else who's using this, like, sure, it's great to have like the generic, Facebook post, LinkedIn post, newsletter, blog post, whatever it is we're generating. But like everyone, and this was to your point about like AI, it's like, it shouldn't be just copy paste. You should use AI to do as much of the legwork as possible. So you can become a curator of your own content and you say, that's good. That's not good. Here's what I like. Here's a couple words that I need to put in there. And that's what you should publish, because that's going to be authentically you. It shouldn't be the AI like telling you exactly what to post and you didn't even have to think about it. Like that's a little bit disingenuous to your audience. So I think getting you 95% of the way there so you can kind of give your twist on it and hit publish, like that's what we think of as success.
I love it. This sets you the creator for consistency, right? Like you can go at that list of the questions, right? Each one of them can be a full episode that you can then develop, right? And that's one of the questions that we get every single time. It's like, how can I be consistent over a long period of time, right? And this is something, one of the many things that I really love about it. But I know we ran out of time. Blaine, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for coming to the show. I think that's the episode. And with that,
wait. I was gonna say one last thing.
Wow, bro.
Blaine, remember, if you stop with caffeine, dibs on La Pavoni over here.
I got you.
Awesome. With that said, guys, thank you so much for tuning to the Contents Profit Podcast. Go ahead and follow the show in your favorite podcasting platform and on social media at BIZBROS Co.
That is right. If you're excited about Cast Magic and what Blaine had to say and offer, make sure you go check him out, follow him, and don't forget to give Contents Profit a 5-star review.
Bye, guys.